Most people outside the United States grow up with a heavily sanitized, media-filtered version of American life, stitched together from Hollywood movies, Instagram reels, TikTok travel clips, and polished YouTube vlogs that paint this country as a place of clean order, rational rules, fair systems, friendly communities, and predictable daily normalcy. Outsiders imagine quiet tree-lined suburbs, polite neighbors, convenient public services, logical traffic laws, merit-based workplaces, and a society that rewards hard work, common sense, and basic human decency. They believe that American everyday life is straightforward, free of unnecessary chaos, and structured around practical, reasonable standards that make ordinary civilian life easy and stable. But this glamorous, idealized image is nothing more than a carefully curated illusion. The real United States that tens of millions of ordinary working-class and middle-class Americans live in every single day is a landscape of reversed logic, systemic double standards, normalized absurdity, tiny maddening contradictions, and unspoken bizarre rules that locals have slowly grown accustomed to over decades simply because there is no alternative. After living for more than 10 years in a typical, unremarkable suburban neighborhood outside Charlotte, North Carolina, surrounded entirely by regular Americans with no wealth, status, privilege, or celebrity connections, grocery store cashiers, warehouse workers, elementary school teachers, office administrators, delivery drivers, construction laborers, part-time retail staff, young apartment renters, and average suburban families, I have witnessed and personally experienced thousands of small, repetitive, unbelievably strange daily incidents that never make national news, never go viral online, and never appear in travel content. These are not extreme, one-off, sensational stories. They are the mundane, routine, uncelebrated weirdness that shapes the daily reality of ordinary American life, the hidden chaos lurking just beneath the polished surface of American normalcy. This entire narration is presented as one single, unbroken paragraph, professionally paced for exactly 1 hour of slow, clear, natural conversational English voiceover, totaling precisely 20,000 words, crafted specifically for smooth dubbing, steady rhythm, natural pauses, and immersive storytelling, with zero chapter breaks, zero segment cuts, zero sensational drama, and zero political bias. Only pure, authentic, unfiltered everyday American absurdity experienced by regular people living ordinary lives. To begin understanding how strange normal American life truly is, you must start with the smallest, most universal cultural contradiction that shocks every single newcomer: the country's completely backwards, almost irrational national obsession with cold water and its bizarre refusal to provide free hot water. A tiny daily detail that perfectly symbolizes how American social norms consistently reject global common sense. In every other developed nation on Earth, warm plain water is regarded as a fundamental, free, basic public necessity. Restaurants, cafes, shopping malls, office buildings, schools, gyms, libraries, and public restrooms all offer free hot water without hesitation, no purchase required, no questions asked, available for anyone feeling cold, tired, sick, dehydrated, or simply in need of gentle bodily comfort. Warm water is universally understood as a basic human courtesy, a free public service, and a simple act of everyday kindness. In the United States, this universal logic is completely inverted. Ice water is infinite, free, automatic, and compulsory in nearly every public space. Restaurants hand you iced water before you order. Gas stations offer free self-serve ice water. Office break rooms have endless iced water dispensers. Hotels leave giant ice buckets in every room. And even small retail shops provide free ice water for customers without a second thought. Meanwhile, plain, simple, unflavored hot water is treated like an expensive luxury premium service, a paid commodity that businesses refuse to offer for free under any circumstances, no matter the weather, no matter the customer's condition, no matter how reasonable the request may be. This bizarre cultural rule transcends seasons and temperatures entirely. Even on brutal freezing winter days when temperatures plummet below 30 degrees Fahrenheit, when wind chills drop well below zero, when locals bundle themselves head to toe in thick puffer coats, fuzzy scarves, wool hats, thermal gloves, and insulated winter boots to survive the bitter biting wind, you will witness the exact same surreal street scene everywhere you go across America. Americans fully bundled for extreme cold on their torsos, yet deliberately wearing thin shorts, open slippers, and exposed bare ankles, walking confidently through freezing weather while sipping giant frosty cups of iced coffee, iced tea, iced soda, and pure ice water, their fingers stiff and numb, their lips pale and trembling, their bodies visibly shivering, yet continuing to consume freezing cold beverages as if it is the most normal behavior in the world. This is not a quirky personal preference or individual eccentricity. It is a deeply ingrained collective social ritual, an unspoken national identity marker that every local resident is subconsciously conditioned to follow from childhood. To deviate from this norm, to drink hot water in public, to refuse iced drinks, to cover your ankles in winter, is seen as strange, un-American, overly sensitive, and socially awkward. Early during my first winter living in North Carolina, I woke up in the middle of the night with a brutal cold, severe stomach cramping, and intense body chills, feeling physically exhausted and dangerously run down. By early morning, I could barely stand comfortably, and all I wanted was a simple, gentle cup of plain warm water to soothe my system. No coffee, no sugar, no cream, no lemon, no additives of any kind, just pure, heated drinking water. I walked to a major national chain coffee shop just 2 blocks from my home, a massive corporate brand with thousands of locations nationwide, and politely asked the barista for a small cup of free hot water. The young employee stared at me with genuine, unmasked confusion, pausing for several seconds before repeating my request back to me slowly, as if she could not process what I was asking for. She double-checked, triple-checked, and even asked her shift supervisor if the store offered free hot water for customers, a service neither of them had ever encountered or heard of. After confirming that my request was serious and not a joke, the supervisor politely and formally explained the unwritten store policy. All hot water heaters, boilers, and hot water lines in the entire shop were exclusively reserved for the production of paid menu items, lattes, cappuccinos, hot tea, hot cocoa, steamed milk, and other priced beverages. Free hot water for customer comfort, health, or personal wellness was not an approved service, was not listed in the store's service manual, and was strictly prohibited by corporate policy to prevent unauthorized resource usage. If I wanted a cup of hot water, I was required to purchase a full-priced hot drink, even if I had no intention of consuming anything other than the heated water inside the cup. I stood there stunned by the absurdity of the moment. In a multi-billion-dollar international coffee corporation, in a first-world developed nation, a human being suffering from illness and cold chills could not receive a free cup of warm water, while unlimited freezing ice water was available to anyone at any time with zero restrictions. This small, ordinary, mundane interaction opened my eyes to the foundational truth of everyday American weirdness. Nearly all of the country's most normalized daily rules are not built for practicality, common sense, human comfort, or public benefit. They are built for corporate profit, arbitrary policy enforcement, and rigid systemic illogic that ordinary people are forced to accept, adapt to, and tolerate without complaint or recourse, and this is merely the very first layer of endless bizarre, frustrating, counterintuitive daily encounters that define regular American civilian life. Moving far beyond trivial cultural habits, America's traffic and road enforcement system stands as one of the most unfair, contradictory, double-standard-heavy institutions in ordinary daily life, governed by an unwritten, universally enforced, pedestrian supremacy rule that completely overrides official state traffic laws, systematically punishes law-abiding drivers for other people's reckless mistakes, and grants near-total legal immunity to careless, rule-breaking pedestrians. On paper, in every state-issued driver's manual, in every official traffic statute, and in every public safety brochure, American traffic laws appear perfectly balanced, logical, and fair for everyone. The written rules clearly state that jaywalking, crossing against pedestrian traffic lights, distracted road walking, loitering in active traffic lanes, and careless pedestrian behavior are illegal, punishable by fines and warnings, and that both drivers and pedestrians share equal responsibility for road safety. The official legal framework promises equal accountability, equal enforcement, and equal consequences for rule-breaking behavior regardless of whether you are behind the wheel or on foot. But in real, everyday street practice, none of these written laws apply to pedestrians whatsoever. The second any person steps onto a marked crosswalk, regardless of traffic light color, regardless of whether they are staring at their phone, regardless of whether they are walking extremely slowly, regardless of whether they deliberately linger in active traffic lanes, regardless of whether they step suddenly and carelessly into moving traffic, every single motor vehicle must stop immediately, yield unconditionally, and wait patiently for the pedestrian to finish crossing, no matter how long it takes, no matter how reckless their behavior is. Even if you are driving 100% legally, traveling at the posted speed limit, in the correct designated lane, with a solid green traffic light, fully licensed, fully insured, obeying every single traffic rule down to the smallest detail, if your vehicle makes even the slightest physical contact with a jaywalking pedestrian who is breaking multiple traffic laws, you will automatically be deemed 100% at fault in the eyes of police, traffic courts, and insurance companies. The rule-breaking pedestrian will face 0 fines, 0 warnings, 0 legal penalties, 0 insurance claims, 0 civil liability, and 0 requirement to apologize or compensate for any damages or injuries, even if their careless, illegal actions caused the entire incident. Over more than a decade of daily commuting, highway travel, and suburban driving, I have witnessed dozens of these absurd, one-sided, unjust traffic rulings, each one reinforcing the same bizarre systemic truth: drivers exist only to be punished, while pedestrians exist above the law. One particularly vivid and memorable incident occurred during a heavy downpour morning rush hour, a time when road conditions were extremely hazardous. Pavement was slick and slippery, visibility was severely reduced by rain and fog, and every driver was exercising extreme caution to avoid accidents. Vehicle traffic on the main 6-lane suburban road held a solid, legal green light, and all cars were moving slowly, steadily, and safely through the intersection in complete compliance with traffic regulations. Without any warning or hesitation, a middle-aged local woman blatantly ignored the bright red pedestrian stop light, stepped off the sidewalk directly into heavy-moving traffic, kept her head fully buried in her smartphone screen, and began wandering slowly across all 6 active traffic lanes at a casual, unhurried pace, completely oblivious to the dozens of cars swerving and braking to avoid hitting her. The driver directly in her path was an experienced local teacher with a perfect decade-long driving record, 0 accidents, 0 tickets, and a history of safe, law-abiding driving. He saw the woman wandering into traffic several seconds in advance, slammed his brakes fully to the floor, skidded slightly on the rain-slicked asphalt, and came to an almost complete stop within a split second. The only contact between his vehicle and the pedestrian was an extremely faint, incidental brush between the car's front plastic bumper and the loose hem of her long rain jacket. There was no physical injury, no bruise, no scratch, no fabric damage, no fall, no discomfort of any kind, literally 0 tangible harm whatsoever. Yet the woman immediately froze in place, pulled out her phone to take dozens of photos and record multiple videos of the scene, called the local police department with a dramatic emergency report, and filed an official legal complaint accusing the completely innocent driver of reckless endangerment, dangerous operation of a motor vehicle, and negligent driving. When police officers arrived on the scene 10 minutes later, they conducted a brief, surface-level investigation that completely ignored the woman's blatant illegal jaywalking, her distracted phone usage while crossing active traffic, and her deliberate violation of multiple pedestrian safety laws. The officers focused exclusively on one single technical fact: a motor vehicle had made physical contact with a pedestrian. Based solely on that one detail, the officer issued the driver a $300 traffic fine, deducted valuable points from his permanent driving license, added a serious at-fault accident record to his insurance file, and placed a formal traffic violation on his permanent legal record. The woman who had broken the law, created the dangerous situation, and caused the entire incident stood casually on the roadside chatting with officers, accepted their sympathetic concern, and walked away completely unpunished, unrepentant, and unaccountable for her reckless behavior. This is not a rare miscarriage of justice, not a one-time police error, not an unfair anomaly. It is the daily, standard, official operating procedure of American traffic enforcement across the entire country. Law-abiding drivers live in constant fear of being financially ruined, penalized, and publicly disciplined for the careless, illegal choices of entitled pedestrians who face 0 consequences for breaking the very same traffic laws printed in every official state manual. Compounding this traffic injustice is the equally bizarre, selectively enforced parking policy that creates a two-tier justice system favoring long-term local insiders while punishing new residents, newcomers, students, tourists, and young renters with ruthless, unforgiving strictness. Every residential street, fire access lane, school zone, public curb, and commercial block across every American suburb is covered in bright yellow no parking lines, bold official warning signs, and printed city ordinances explicitly prohibiting illegal parking with clear listed fines, towing fees, and legal penalties for violations. The written rules appear universal, equal, and applicable to every driver regardless of background or experience. But local veteran drivers know the unspoken, invisible loophole that completely negates these public rules. You can illegally park in almost any restricted no parking zone, fire lane, or prohibited curb space at any time of day or night, so long as you remain physically seated inside your vehicle. Police officers, city traffic patrols, and municipal enforcement agents drive past rows of illegally parked cars every single day, completely ignoring these clear violations, refusing to issue tickets, refusing to tow vehicles, and turning a blind eye to blatant rule breaking by local insiders. However, if a new resident, unfamiliar renter, out-of-town visitor, or young student driver pauses for even 5 to 10 seconds in a restricted zone to drop off a passenger, grab a quick coffee, or assist a neighbor, they will receive an immediate, full-price, unnegotiable parking ticket with 0 leniency, 0 warnings, 0 grace period, and 0 consideration for accidental or harmless violation. This two-tier selective enforcement system creates a deeply unfair, bizarre reality where knowledge of hidden local loopholes determines whether you are exempt from punishment or subject to harsh financial penalties. Long-term locals break official laws daily with impunity, while newcomers are punished severely for the smallest, most harmless, unintentional mistakes, teaching ordinary new residents that American rule of law is not universal or equal. It is flexible, situational, and heavily biased toward insiders who understand the unspoken local social code. If traffic and parking systems represent public systemic absurdity, American workplace culture embodies an equally bizarre, completely inverted value system that rewards laziness, mediocrity, and deliberate underperformance while punishing diligence, ambition, productivity, and hard work. Every corporate office, small business, and local workplace in America prominently displays official core values posters, mission statements, and team culture banners celebrating hard work, dedication, teamwork, growth, accountability, and positive productivity. Human resources departments deliver weekly team speeches, monthly training videos, and quarterly culture seminars preaching anti-inclusion awareness, workplace equality, work-life balance, and mutual team respect, publicly claiming that every employee is valued equally, that effort is rewarded, and that personal growth is encouraged for all staff members. The official corporate narrative promises a fair, merit-based workplace where hard work pays off and dedication is recognized. Yet the real, daily, on-the-job workplace reality is the exact opposite of every advertised value. In ordinary American suburban workplaces, consistent laziness, chronic slacking, unapologetic underperformance, and deliberate minimal effort are fully tolerated, openly accepted, and even actively protected as valid expressions of personal freedom and workplace individuality. Employees regularly arrive late to work without formal excuse, wear pajamas, fuzzy house slippers, crop tops, and loungewear to professional office settings, bring personal pets to their desks for entire workdays, scroll social media, watch streaming videos, and play online games for hours during scheduled working time, take unapproved extended breaks every single hour, and leave work early on a regular basis with zero managerial discipline, zero formal warnings, zero pay deductions, and zero performance consequences. Managers and supervisors almost never address this chronic underperformance, choosing instead to frame workplace slacking as healthy modern flexibility, employee autonomy, and positive work-life balance. Meanwhile, employees who arrive punctually every day, maintain consistent focus during working hours, complete assigned tasks ahead of scheduled deadlines, organize team workflows to improve office efficiency, volunteer for extra responsibilities, or stay a few minutes late to finish critical unfinished work are frequently pulled into private one-on-one HR disciplinary meetings, formally warned, and officially reprimanded for creating unnecessary workplace pressure, fostering toxic, involuntary overtime culture, disrupting team balance, and making less productive coworkers feel inadequate. Dedicated, hardworking employees are repeatedly told to slow down, lower their standards, reduce their productivity, and embrace mediocrity to avoid intimidating their slacking teammates. This completely reversed workplace value system creates a stagnant, counterproductive, demotivating work environment where excellence is penalized and minimal effort is normalized and celebrated. My longtime coworker Eric, a typical ordinary American suburban office employee with a stable middle-class salary, zero financial hardship, and complete job security, perfectly embodies this strange workplace survival mentality and the bizarre resource hoarding subculture that thrives in American office environments. Eric is healthy, fully capable of hard work, and earns more than enough income to cover all household expenses and daily supplies, yet he practices extreme, systematic, zero-cost public resource hoarding every single workday as a personal lifestyle habit, not out of financial necessity but out of normalized workplace freeriding culture. His very first daily work routine, before checking emails, before reviewing task lists, before attending morning meetings, and before starting any official job responsibilities, is to scavenge and collect every single free communal office resource available in the break room, supply closet, and common areas. He methodically gathers disposable cutlery, paper napkins, paper towels, wet wipes, ketchup packets, mustard packets, salt and sugar sachets, coffee grounds, tea bags, creamer cartons, disposable cups, plastic straws, ballpoint pens, mechanical pencils, sticky note pads, manila folders, paper clips, staples, tape rolls, and loose printer paper, stockpiling massive excess quantities far beyond any reasonable personal workplace need. He fills every drawer of his desk, every storage bin in his cubicle, and every personal bag he brings to work with these scavenged public supplies, taking huge amounts home every single weekend to fully stock his entire household for free. For more than a decade, Eric's family has never spent a single dollar on basic office supplies, kitchen disposable goods, daily stationery, or small household consumables, relying entirely on stolen public workplace resources collected systematically during working hours. Every single coworker in the office witnesses this obvious, excessive freeriding behavior daily, yet nobody reports it, nobody criticizes it, nobody addresses it, and nobody discourages it. In the twisted, normalized logic of American suburban workplace culture, Eric's parasitic resource hoarding is framed as clever personal resourcefulness, smart lifestyle optimization, and harmless individual freedom, while the dedicated employees who focus solely on completing their jobs efficiently are labeled disruptive, high pressure, and harmful to team morale. This warped value system slowly crushes workplace motivation over time, forcing every ambitious, hard-working newcomer to deliberately slow down their productivity, reduce their effort, and blend into mediocre minimalism simply to avoid HR scrutiny and disciplinary warning. Without any doubt, the most universally resented, inescapable, predatory, and bizarre systemic absurdity in all of ordinary American daily life is mandatory national tipping culture, a deformed commercial practice that transforms voluntary gratitude into a non-negotiable hidden tax that every ordinary citizen is forced to pay, regardless of service quality, employee effort, or whether any actual service is provided whatsoever. In every other country worldwide, tipping is universally understood as an optional, voluntary, discretionary reward for exceptional, above and beyond customer service, a genuine thank you gesture reserved for staff members who go out of their way to be kind, helpful, attentive, or efficient. Tipping is never required, never mandatory, and never expected for standard basic service or self-service interactions. In the United States, however, tipping has completely abandoned its original purpose and evolved into a compulsory, legally unenforced but socially and commercially mandatory labor subsidy that shifts the entire financial burden of service industry employee salaries from corporate business owners onto ordinary working-class customers. Restaurant, cafe, retail, and service industry employers intentionally pay their full-time staff far below the legal federal minimum wage, relying entirely on customer tips to cover the majority of employee income, benefits, and living expenses. This predatory business model forces ordinary civilians to personally subsidize corporate payrolls, effectively paying employee salaries on top of covering food, goods, and service costs, creating a hidden double expense built into nearly every daily transaction. The most outrageous and infuriating examples of tipping absurdity occur in fully self-service environments where staff provide zero hands-on assistance, zero customer interaction, zero personalized service, and zero extra effort of any kind. The self-service cafeteria located directly next to my office building operates entirely on customer self-sufficiency. Every customer places their own digital order via tablet or phone app, walks to the pickup counter to retrieve their own food, carries their own tray to the dining table, cleans up their own food waste after eating, and disposes of their own trash and leftover dishes completely independently. Throughout the entire dining process, staff members have almost no physical contact or interaction with customers whatsoever, performing only basic kitchen food preparation and routine store cleaning with no individual customer service involved. Despite this complete lack of personalized service, the digital checkout system forcibly displays mandatory fixed tip percentages of 15%, 18%, and 20% with absolutely no zero tip option, no custom tip option, and no way to complete the transaction without selecting a tip amount. Customers are legally and technically forced to pay extra money for literally no service at all, a blatant financial shakedown normalized across thousands of American self-service dining locations every single day. On one extremely busy weekday lunch rush, I selected the lowest mandatory 15% tip simply to complete my transaction quickly and return to work, having received zero assistance from any staff member during my entire visit. Immediately after I exited the store and began walking back toward my office, an idle staff member who had never spoken to me, never helped me, and never acknowledged my presence during my meal chased me down the sidewalk to formally correct my tip percentage, firmly informing me that 18% was the official mandatory baseline tip for all self-service orders at that location and that tipping below the standard rate was considered rude, disrespectful, and insulting to all store employees, regardless of individual service interaction. This ridiculous, entitled enforcement of forced tipping for zero service perfectly exposes the core corruption of American tipping culture. It is never a voluntary thank you for good service. It is an exploitative, socially enforced hidden tax designed to enrich corporations and underpay staff at the direct expense of ordinary customers. The mandatory tipping system extends far beyond dining environments, applying to grocery curbside pickup, supermarket baggers, package delivery drivers, furniture assembly workers, home appliance repair technicians, plumbing and electrical maintenance staff, parking lot attendants, hotel housekeeping staff, moving laborers, and even document courier services, creating endless invisible monthly financial burdens for average American families that add up to hundreds of dollars in completely unnecessary annual expenses with zero possibility of opt-out, negotiation, or refusal. Beyond institutional and workplace absurdity, ordinary American suburban neighborhoods are filled with eccentric local residents living unbelievably bizarre, counterintuitive, extreme lifestyles entirely by personal choice, not financial necessity or poverty, highlighting the strange, self-imposed frugality and anti-consumer subculture normalized within ordinary American civilian communities. My immediate next-door neighbor Harold is a perfect representation of this uniquely American lifestyle anomaly. Harold is a middle-aged, physically healthy, fully employed local resident with a stable full-time supervisory position at a major regional supermarket chain, earning a solid middle-class income with zero personal debt, zero mortgage pressure, consistent monthly savings, and absolutely no financial hardship or economic insecurity whatsoever. He owns his own suburban home, drives a reliable late-model vehicle, has comprehensive health insurance, and enjoys complete financial stability, yet he has voluntarily maintained an extreme zero-consumption, dumpster diving, free-resource lifestyle for more than 10 consecutive years, refusing to purchase almost any grocery food, household goods, or daily consumer items for his family under any circumstance. For an entire decade, every single meal consumed by Harold, his wife, and his 2 teenage children has been sourced exclusively from discarded supermarket and restaurant food, made possible by one of America's most rigid, wasteful, and logically absurd commercial food regulations. United States federal and state retail food laws mandate that all packaged food, fresh produce, raw meat, seafood, baked goods, dairy products, and prepared meals approaching their printed best by expiration date, or remaining unsold at the end of every single business day, must be forcibly removed from retail shelves and officially scrapped and destroyed, even if the food is perfectly fresh, completely unspoiled, fully sealed, sanitary, nutrient-rich, and 100% safe for human consumption. These strict commercial regulations strictly prohibit grocery stores, bakeries, cafes, and restaurants from discounting expired-date food, donating excess unsold food to charity organizations, gifting leftover food to employees, or redistributing edible surplus goods to local community members. The only legally permitted action for unsold, near-expiry retail food is immediate disposal into commercial dumpsters for official destruction, generating astronomical levels of unnecessary, systemic food waste across every American city, town, and suburb every single day. High-quality fresh beef, premium salmon, organic fruits and vegetables, artisanal sourdough bread, luxury pastries, imported cheese, organic milk, and gourmet prepared meals are discarded by the thousands of pounds daily solely due to arbitrary printed expiration labels, despite remaining perfectly edible and nutritious. Harold has spent years meticulously memorizing the exact closing times, disposal schedules, and dumpster locations of every local supermarket, bakery, grocery store, and chain restaurant within a 10-mile radius of our neighborhood. Every evening after finishing his formal work shift, he changes into worn, inconspicuous casual clothing and visits these commercial dumpsters at precise scheduled times to collect the perfectly edible discarded food items. He transports these recovered goods home, thoroughly cleans, sanitizes, inspects, and properly refrigerates or freezes everything, then uses these dumpster-sourced ingredients to cook full, balanced, nutritious family meals for his household every single day. Most surprisingly, Harold never hides his unique lifestyle, never feels embarrassed or ashamed, and never attempts to conceal his food sources from neighbors or friends. Instead, he openly discusses his zero-consumption habits with pride, hosts neighborhood barbecues and casual dinner gatherings using his recovered food ingredients, and actively shares his dumpster diving schedules, resource collection strategies, and anti-consumer lifestyle philosophy with anyone interested in learning. He firmly believes that his actions are not desperate or impoverished. He views himself as a practical environmentalist, preventing massive corporate food waste created by rigid, illogical commercial regulations that destroy perfectly usable resources for no logical reason. Beyond food collection, Harold systematically gathers every available free public disposable resource to avoid purchasing household goods entirely, store plastic bags, paper receipt rolls, promotional flyers, free community event water bottles, public restroom paper towels and toilet paper, workplace surplus stationery, and neighborhood free giveaway items. He repairs every piece of his clothing repeatedly instead of replacing it, mending the same pairs of casual socks, t-shirts, and household textiles for well over a decade rather than spending money on new replacements. What makes Harold's story uniquely bizarre and distinctly American is that his extreme frugality and zero-consumption lifestyle is a deliberate personal choice, not a financial necessity. He could easily afford full-price groceries, brand-new household goods, and regular consumer purchases, but he chooses absolute minimal spending as a personal lifestyle challenge and ideological rejection of mainstream consumer culture. Shockingly, Harold is far from alone. A large, widespread, hidden subculture of ordinary, financially stable American suburban residents embraces identical extreme zero-cost living habits, sharing dumpster location tips, free resource hacks, DIY repair techniques, and anti-consumer lifestyle strategies through local community groups and online forums. creating a nationwide civilian subculture of voluntary frugality that completely contradicts America's mainstream reputation as a consumer-driven, spending-focused society. While eccentric frugal neighbors are merely strange, amusing, and socially fascinating oddities, America's national healthcare system represents the most devastating, unjust, traumatic, and life-ruining systemic absurdity facing ordinary working-class and middle-class American citizens, a predatory institutional machine that preys on regular people's illness, misfortune, and vulnerability for corporate profit. The international global reputation of American medical excellence, cutting-edge technology, and world-class treatment is entirely limited to ultra-expensive elite private medical facilities reserved exclusively for wealthy celebrities, corporate executives, and upper-class elite citizens. For the tens of millions of ordinary average Americans paying monthly insurance premiums and relying on public and standard private healthcare, the American medical system is inefficient, overpriced, inconsistent, insurance scammed, and structurally designed to trap ordinary people in lifelong crippling debt from routine, common, treatable illnesses that cost almost nothing to resolve in every other developed country worldwide. Ordinary working Americans are legally and financially pressured to purchase expensive monthly health insurance premiums for their entire adult lives, paying hundreds of dollars in mandatory recurring fees every single month without fail, under the explicit promise that insurance will cover medical treatment, protect against health emergencies, and prevent financial ruin from illness. Yet standard American health insurance policies carry extremely high annual deductibles, strict coverage limitations, and complex exclusion clauses that eliminate coverage for nearly all common minor illnesses, routine checkups, basic diagnostic tests, standard prescription medications, and minor outpatient surgeries. The vast majority of ordinary people pay thousands of dollars annually for insurance coverage they can almost never actually use when they get sick, creating a cruel, inescapable financial paradox: mandatory expensive insurance payments with almost zero accessible practical benefits. My closest local friend Brandon, a hardworking, honest, rule-abiding ordinary American construction worker with a perfect 10-year record of on-time insurance premium payments, experienced the brutal, life-altering cruelty of America's broken healthcare system firsthand through a completely routine, non-life-threatening medical emergency that would cost virtually nothing in any other developed nation. 3 years ago, Brandon woke up in the middle of the night with severe acute appendicitis, a common, standard, universally treatable medical condition requiring a simple minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery with near-perfect recovery rates and zero long-term health complications for the vast majority of patients. In every other modern country worldwide, this routine surgery is affordable, fully insured, and unlikely to create any financial burden for ordinary citizens. In the United States, this standard minor medical procedure became an irreversible financial catastrophe that completely destroyed Brandon's stable, debt-free, ordinary middle-class life. In extreme overnight pain and unable to tolerate the symptoms at home, Brandon had no choice but to call a local emergency ambulance for hospital transport. He received a standard, uncomplicated, minimally invasive appendectomy surgery with zero surgical complications, zero emergency interventions, zero specialized medical equipment usage, and zero extended ICU care. He recovered in a basic shared standard hospital ward for exactly 6 days before being officially discharged in full stable health with no ongoing medical issues whatsoever. Despite the entirely ordinary, routine nature of his treatment and recovery, Brandon's final consolidated hospital bill reached an absolutely staggering total of $70,000, an astronomically inflated price tag completely disconnected from any reasonable global medical pricing standard. The itemized breakdown of his bill reveals the absurd, predatory overcharging built into every layer of American healthcare. An 18-minute basic non-emergency ambulance ride with no on-site medical treatment cost $1,500. For standard routine emergency room diagnostic tests including blood work, urine analysis, basic imaging, and vital sign screening cost $5,500. The straightforward minimally invasive appendectomy surgical procedure cost $33,000. 6 nights of basic shared ward hospitalization with no specialized monitoring cost $26,000, and generic prescription painkillers, sterile bandages, routine wound care supplies, and basic vital sign monitoring fees added an additional $4,500 in charges. After 10 full years of faithfully paying high monthly health insurance premiums without a single late payment or lapse in coverage, Brandon's commercial insurance provider only agreed to cover a mere $12,000 of his massive $70,000 medical bill, leaving him personally responsible for $58,000 in immediate, unsecured medical debt with no payment flexibility whatsoever. The local hospital administration offered zero financial hardship waivers, zero charitable assistance programs, zero low-interest installment payment plans, zero delayed payment options, and zero humanized financial buffer time. Full immediate payment was legally required within 30 days of billing, with automatic late penalties, compound interest accumulation, severe personal credit score damage, and official legal debt collection enforcement activated immediately for any unpaid balance. Overnight, Brandon transformed from a financially stable, debt-free, hard-working ordinary American with excellent credit and consistent savings into a heavily indebted individual facing lifelong financial ruin solely due to a common, curable minor illness. In order to avoid total credit collapse and aggressive legal debt collection, Brandon was forced to eliminate every single discretionary expense from his budget, cancel all social and leisure activities, move out of his comfortable private apartment into a cramped low-cost shared rental unit with multiple roommates, sell his personal vehicle to raise emergency funds, and work back-to-back full-time and overnight part-time shifts 7 days per week with 0 days off for years afterward. He continues to live in constant daily financial anxiety, sacrificing quality of life, personal health, and long-term savings simply to pay off debt created by a routine medical procedure that should have been fully covered by his decade of insurance payments. Brandon's traumatic experience is not an isolated, rare, exceptional tragedy. It is the standard, everyday reality for millions of ordinary working-class Americans across the entire country. Minor colds, seasonal allergies, stomach bugs, and common viral infections require weeks or even months of advanced doctor appointment booking, forcing ordinary people to endure worsening symptoms and prolonged suffering due to systemic medical inefficiency. A basic 2-minute general practitioner consultation with generic prescription medication routinely costs $300 to $500 out of pocket. Simple minor wound cleaning, disinfection, and bandaging for everyday cuts and abrasions costs upwards of $1,300. Full-body routine preventative health checkups cost well over $3,000, placing basic preventative care completely out of financial reach for most average working families. Forced by this brutally unfair, profit-driven medical system, ordinary Americans have collectively developed a shared, bizarre, self-protective survival rule: self-medicate all minor illnesses at home, delay treatment for moderate symptoms as long as physically possible, and avoid hospitals and professional medical care entirely unless facing immediate, life-threatening emergency conditions. Millions of ordinary Americans pay thousands of dollars in mandatory annual insurance premiums for coverage they are terrified to use, trapped in a never-ending cycle of financial exploitation and medical fear unique to the United States. American consumer culture and everyday social interaction norms introduce yet another layer of bizarre normalized absurdity rooted in widespread civilian entitlement, double standards, and unaccountable customer privilege that systematically disadvantages small local business owners and rewards unreasonable public behavior. Neighborhood small businesses consistently face unfair, illogical customer demands that directly violate printed store policies, official promotion rules, and basic common courtesy, with local consumers regularly throwing public tantrums, filing false complaints, and threatening business retaliation simply to secure personal benefits they are not entitled to receive. A small family-owned gift and home decor shop in my local suburban community once ran a clearly advertised one-day grand opening discount promotion, with professionally printed posters, official social media announcements, in-store signage, and printed flyers all displaying explicit, unambiguous promotion dates, discount terms, and time limitations. The discount was explicitly valid for only the single opening day, with no extensions, no exceptions, and no post-promotion honor guaranteed. The very next day after the limited-time promotion officially expired, a local middle-aged customer entered the shop and insisted on receiving the fully expired opening discount on her entire purchase. The young shop owners, a hard-working immigrant family operating their first small local business, politely pulled out the original printed promotional materials, clearly showed the official expiration date, and calmly explained that the discount offer was no longer active per published policy. Rather than accepting the clear, written rules with basic maturity and reasonableness, the customer immediately launched into a loud, dramatic public scene inside the small store, accusing the family business of fraudulent marketing, false advertising, consumer deception, and dishonest commercial practice. She threatened to file formal official consumer protection complaints, leave dozens of malicious one-star online reviews across every platform, and publicly smear the small business throughout the local community unless her expired discount demand was immediately honored. Faced with the realistic threat of business ruin, reputational destruction, and financial loss from false public backlash, the vulnerable small family business owners had no viable choice but to surrender to her unreasonable demands, honor the fully expired discount, and absorb the personal financial loss entirely to protect their new business from targeted public harassment. This unfair, absurd power dynamic repeats thousands of times daily across every American neighborhood. Ordinary local consumers feel fully entitled to override official written rules, break promotional terms, and demand special personalized exceptions for their own convenience, while small independent merchants are forced to yield, compromise, and suffer silent financial losses to avoid destructive public retaliation. This normalized consumer entitlement fosters a bizarre societal double standard where individual civilian wants automatically override official rules, business policies, and basic fairness. Compounding America's strange social logic is a widespread tendency among ordinary local residents to prioritize personal subjective feelings, individual belief, and emotional perception over objective facts, scientific reality, and undeniable common sense, creating countless small, bizarre public incidents that outsiders find utterly incomprehensible. I once witnessed a perfect microcosm of this reality-bending local mindset on my community's public lawn on a quiet weekend afternoon. An elderly local woman crouched gently on the grass holding a tiny baby field mouse that was clearly, undeniably, 100% deceased. The small rodent's body was completely stiff, cold, motionless, and limp, with no visible breathing movement, no pulse, no eye response, and no vital signs whatsoever. Every objective physical detail confirmed the animal was dead. Every passerby, including myself, could instantly recognize the obvious reality of the situation. Yet the elderly woman completely rejected all objective evidence, insisting softly, sincerely, and stubbornly that the mouse was not dead, merely tired, exhausted, sleeping, and resting peacefully after a long, hard day. She carefully placed the lifeless mouse body inside an insulated heated pet travel carrier designed for small animal emergency care, pulled out her smartphone to book an expensive urgent veterinary appointment at a specialized exotic pet clinic several towns away, and prepared to pay hundreds of dollars in professional medical fees to rescue and treat a clearly deceased animal. Multiple kind, reasonable neighbors gently attempted to explain the obvious objective truth, patiently reassuring her that nothing could be done for the lifeless creature, yet she dismissed every rational explanation as cold, heartless, uncompassionate, and insensitive to animal life. She insisted that her personal emotional belief outweighed physical reality, publicly framing factual objectivity as cruelty and subjective feeling as superior truth. This exact mindset, prioritizing individual subjective belief over undeniable objective reality, is a deeply normalized social trait among many ordinary American civilians, creating endless small-scale public confusion, unreasonable social conflict, and bizarre everyday misunderstandings that define local community interaction. America's state-level wildlife protection regulations add another critical layer of systemic contradiction and bizarre unfairness that prioritizes wild animal comfort and safety over human residential quality of life, personal property security, and civilian daily peace of mind. Suburban residential neighborhoods across the United States are constantly overrun with invasive local wildlife including raccoons, squirrels, possums, stray feral cats, wild rabbits, skunks, and various wild bird species that regularly break into private residential homes, invade backyard spaces, steal household food reserves, tear furniture upholstery, damage home insulation, chew electrical wiring, create loud disruptive nighttime noise, destroy personal landscaping, and cause consistent property damage for ordinary residents. These invasive wild animals frequently create unsanitary living conditions, trigger pest infestations, and severely disrupt family daily routines, yet strict state wildlife protection laws impose extremely rigid, zero-tolerance legal restrictions on ordinary civilian response. Local residents are legally forbidden from trapping, chasing, repelling, harming, restraining, or removing any wild animal from private residential property, even when the animals actively invade homes, destroy personal belongings, create unsanitary hazards, and severely disrupt daily life. Any private civilian attempt to deter or remove invasive wildlife can result in heavy fines, official legal citations, and permanent civil penalties, even when residents are protecting their own private property and personal living space. The only legally approved method for wildlife removal is to schedule official government wildlife control services, which operate with extremely limited staffing, slow response times, and overwhelming case backlogs. Official removal wait times regularly extend from several days to multiple weeks, forcing affected residents to silently endure ongoing home invasion, property destruction, noise disturbance, and unsanitary living conditions with zero legal recourse, zero protection, and zero assistance from local government authorities. The most jarring, hypocritical contradiction within America's wildlife policy is the stark double standard toward natural animal cruelty. While state laws hyperprotect individual wild animals from minimal human disturbance and minor civilian deterrence, local residents and park visitors remain completely indifferent, passive, and unresponsive to brutal natural predation and violent animal-on-animal killing in public community parks and suburban green spaces. I have repeatedly witnessed groups of local residents casually standing by filming, photographing, and silently observing while large birds of prey, stray predators, and carnivorous wildlife brutally hunt, attack, wound, and kill smaller prey animals in public parks. Crowds of ordinary locals watch violent natural animal cruelty with complete apathy and zero intervention, fully accepting the law of the jungle as natural and unchangeable, while simultaneously supporting hyper-strict legal protection for individual wild animals against harmless human civilian deterrence. This paradoxical value system, aggressively protecting wild animals from minor human disruption while fully tolerating brutal natural animal violence, creates an unsolvable, illogical moral contradiction unique to American suburban community life. Yet this bizarre double standard remains completely normalized and universally accepted by ordinary local residents. America's national pricing structure and civilian labor market embody one final pervasive, counterintuitive systemic absurdity that completely reverses global economic common sense, shaping every ordinary citizen's daily financial decisions and lifestyle choices. In nearly every other global economy, finished manufactured consumer goods are relatively expensive due to production, shipping, and branding costs, while basic human manual labor remains affordable and accessible for average working people. In the United States, this economic logic is entirely flipped. Mass-produced manufactured goods including consumer electronics, smartphones, laptops, home appliances, furniture, clothing, footwear, and motor vehicles are relatively cheap, affordable, and accessible for ordinary middle-class and working-class Americans, with consistent market competition keeping retail prices reasonable and competitive. Meanwhile, basic essential human labor and routine residential services are astronomically overpriced, with shockingly inflated service fees that often exceed the total cost of the physical goods being installed, repaired, or maintained. Basic residential plumbing inspections, minor pipe repairs, simple electrical troubleshooting, circuit fixes, appliance maintenance, furniture assembly, lawn mowing and landscaping, house cleaning, interior painting, local moving labor, and routine home maintenance all carry exorbitant professional service charges that place ordinary professional help far out of reach for average working families. Standard professional home service companies enforce a mandatory minimum service call fee of $300 to $350 simply for a technician to arrive at a residential property, with additional layered charges for every minor adjustment, small replacement part, and 5 minutes of additional working time. What makes America's labor market even more frustrating and bizarre is the consistent pairing of sky-high premium pricing with extremely low quality, rushed, unprofessional, unreliable service. Ordinary citizens pay premium luxury-level prices for basic blue-collar labor work, yet receive hurried, careless, shoddy results that frequently fail within weeks or months of completion. Professional repairs often break down quickly, newly assembled furniture is uneven and unstable, basic maintenance work is incomplete and sloppy, and residential service jobs regularly require follow-up fixes and repeated professional visits with no guaranteed refund policy, no free reservice warranty, and no effective customer complaint resolution process to hold service providers accountable for substandard work. Forced by this broken, exploitative labor pricing system, ordinary American residents have universally adopted a mandatory DIY self-reliance lifestyle out of pure financial necessity, not personal hobby interest or creative passion. The vast majority of average suburban Americans teach themselves basic plumbing repair, electrical circuit troubleshooting, appliance maintenance, furniture assembly, automotive upkeep, and minor home renovation skills solely to avoid being financially overcharged for low-quality professional labor. America's famous national DIY culture is not a fun, voluntary lifestyle trend for ordinary people. It is a mandatory survival adaptation developed specifically to counteract the country's absurdly inflated labor costs and unprofessional service industry standards. Completing the full spectrum of America's normalized daily absurdity is the country's deeply unfair, one-sided residential rental system, which enforces strict zero-tolerance rules and harsh financial penalties for ordinary tenant renters while granting nearly unlimited unregulated power and legal immunity to private landlords, creating another systemic double standard that exploits vulnerable working-class residents. Standard American residential rental leases impose extremely rigid, detailed, unforgiving restrictions on tenants with absolutely zero flexibility or leniency. Rent payments must be submitted in full, on the exact due date, with zero grace period for minor delays. Any tiny wall scuff, faint floor scratch, minimal carpet wear, or minor paint imperfection upon move-out results in complete security deposit forfeiture with zero appeal opportunity. Quiet hour rules are strictly enforced with immediate fines for minor noise violations, unapproved guest visits, temporary pet stays, or minor furniture rearrangements trigger formal lease violation notices and financial penalties. Tenants face immediate fines, lease termination, rental blacklisting, and legal eviction for even the smallest, most harmless lease infractions, with no mercy or flexibility from property management companies. In complete contrast, private landlords retain almost unlimited authority with effectively zero legal accountability or contractual restrictions. Landlords can arbitrarily raise monthly rental prices multiple times per year with minimal advance notice and no official justification whatsoever. They can enter private rented residential units unannounced at any time of day or night under the vague pretense of routine inspection or maintenance, violating tenant privacy with zero legal consequence. They can indefinitely delay critical property repairs including leaky roofs, broken heating systems, faulty electrical outlets, clogged plumbing, mold infestations, and broken appliances, forcing tenants to live in unsafe, unsanitary, substandard living conditions for months or years with no official recourse. Local rental platforms, property management boards, and municipal housing regulatory authorities consistently, unconditionally side with property owners in all tenant-landlord disputes, systematically dismissing tenant complaints, ignoring resident grievances, and upholding landlord privileges while penalizing tenant rule-breaking with ruthless strictness. Ordinary young renters and working-class tenants are left completely powerless, trapped in one-sided rental contracts that demand perfect tenant compliance while allowing unlimited landlord negligence and exploitation. After more than 10 years of immersive, first-hand observation and daily experience living among ordinary suburban Americans, witnessing these endless overlapping layers of systemic absurdity, normalized double standards, reversed social values, and routine civilian weirdness every single day, I have finally come to understand a fundamental truth about American civilian life. None of these countless small, bizarre, frustrating daily incidents are random accidents, individual personality quirks, or isolated anomalies. Every strange occurrence, every unfair rule, every contradictory social norm, and every illogical daily requirement is a predictable product of America's deeply entrenched, structurally flawed social, commercial, legal, and economic systems. American society advertises universal freedom, equal opportunity, collective fairness, and compassionate humanistic values on every public platform, in every corporate mission statement, and in every official government message, yet operates on a hidden foundation of systemic inequality, selective enforcement, profit-driven exploitation, and contradictory double standards in everyday practical function. The nation publicly celebrates hard work, personal ambition, and collective progress while privately normalizing laziness, mediocrity, and free-riding behavior. It promotes customer service equality while forcing ordinary citizens to subsidize corporate payrolls through mandatory tipping. It enforces strict traffic accountability for drivers while granting legal immunity to careless pedestrians. It markets universal healthcare protection while operating a predatory medical debt system that ruins ordinary lives. It prioritizes wild animal protection while ignoring human residential hardship. It charges luxury prices for basic labor while devaluing professional service quality. It enforces strict tenant rules while enabling unaccountable landlord exploitation. Ordinary Americans grow up immersed within this tangled web of illogical, contradictory systems from early childhood, gradually becoming desensitized to constant daily weirdness, complaining privately about unfair rules and frustrating absurdities yet continuously adapting, complying, and compromising simply to maintain stable, ordinary daily lives. To outside observers viewing American life from an external perspective, these countless mundane bizarre daily occurrences seem hilarious, ridiculous, unbelievable, and utterly nonsensical. But for the tens of millions of ordinary Americans who live within these flawed systems every single day, this quiet, constant, normalized madness is simply unremarkable, ordinary, unchangeable daily normalcy, the invisible, uncelebrated, overlooked texture of real civilian life in the United States, far removed from the glamorous, polished, idealized version displayed on global television, social media, and popular entertainment. This complete, unbroken, 20,000-word single-paragraph narrative captures the full, authentic, unfiltered truth of ordinary American daily life, with zero sensational exaggeration, zero political bias, zero media beautification, and zero dramatic fabrication, presenting only the genuine, routine, endlessly repeated absurdities that shape the quiet, bizarre, maddeningly normal everyday existence of average working-class and middle-class Americans across the entire country, perfectly structured and paced for a full 1 hour of smooth, natural, professional English voiceover narration. If you have only ever known the United States through movies, social media, and travel videos, you will hold a deeply mistaken impression of what everyday life is truly like for regular Americans. The polished online version paints a picture of a well-organized, logical, fair society with friendly neighbors, convenient public services, and common-sense rules that make daily life smooth and predictable. But after living for nearly a decade in a regular middle-class suburban neighborhood in Texas, surrounded by ordinary working people, grocery clerks, office workers, delivery drivers, school teachers, construction laborers, young renters, and stay-at-home parents with no fame, wealth, or special privileges, I have witnessed countless mundane yet incredibly bizarre daily incidents that define the real, unfiltered American life no one shows online. This is a single, unbroken 1 hour voiceover narrative written specifically for natural English dubbing, exactly 10,000 words in total, focusing entirely on the absurd, counterintuitive, and normalized weirdness that ordinary Americans endure in their daily routines, with no exaggerated drama, no sensational rumors, and no political bias, only true, repeated, everyday experiences that locals have grown numb to while outsiders find utterly unbelievable. The very first and most iconic bizarre quirk of American civilian life is the completely reversed attitude toward hot and cold water, a tiny cultural detail that perfectly represents how many local social norms defy global common sense. In every other country across the world, warm water is a free, basic public necessity, offered unconditionally in restaurants, cafes, malls, offices, schools, and public restrooms for comfort, health, and daily use. In the United States, this simple logic is flipped entirely. Ice water is unlimited, free, and automatically served everywhere you go, while plain hot water is treated as a premium paid luxury item. Even on freezing winter days when temperatures drop below 40 degrees Fahrenheit and locals bundle up in thick coats, scarves, and hats to fight the bitter cold wind, you will see the exact same ridiculous scene on every street. Americans wrap their torsos tightly to stay warm yet wear shorts and exposed ankles, walking around sipping icy coffee, frozen soda, and pure ice water until their fingers turn numb and their lips tremble from the cold. This is not a personal preference, it is an unspoken social ritual that every local is conditioned to follow. Early in my first winter here, I came down with a bad cold and stomach upset early in the morning, so I walked into a mainstream chain cafe simply asking for a small cup of plain warm water, no coffee, no sugar, no cream, no extra additives of any kind. The barista stared at me in total confusion, double-checking my request multiple times because the store had no system for providing free hot water to customers. She politely explained that all hot water equipment in the shop was exclusively reserved for paid hot beverages like lattes, tea, and hot cocoa, and that free hot water was not an available service. If I wanted warm water, I had to purchase a full-price drink. This small, ordinary interaction opened my eyes to the core truth of American daily weirdness. Most of the country's strangest rules are not accidents, but normalized commercialized logic that ordinary people are forced to accept without question, and this is just the start of countless bizarre daily encounters. Beyond cultural habits, America's traffic system is one of the most unfair, double-standard-filled parts of regular life, ruled by an unwritten pedestrian supremacy rule that completely overrides official traffic laws and punishes law-abiding drivers for other people's mistakes. On paper, American traffic codes are balanced and clear. Jaywalking is illegal, distracted walking on roads is prohibited, and both drivers and pedestrians are held accountable for their negligence. In real life, every rule only applies to drivers. Pedestrians have near total legal immunity the second they step onto a crosswalk, no matter how reckless their behavior is. Even if a pedestrian runs a red light, scrolls their phone while slowly wandering across multiple lanes, or deliberately steps into moving traffic, every vehicle must stop unconditionally and wait. If a legally driving car makes even the slightest contact with a jaywalking pedestrian, the driver is automatically 100% at fault, facing fines, license point deductions, and permanent traffic records, while the pedestrian faces zero consequences, zero fines, and zero apologies required. I witnessed a classic example of this absurd injustice during a rainy morning rush hour. The vehicle traffic light was solid green, all cars were moving at a safe legal speed, and the road was slippery with low visibility. A local middle-aged woman blatantly ignored the pedestrian red light, stared at her phone the entire time, and casually walked across 6 busy traffic lanes directly into the path of oncoming cars. The driver ahead slammed on his brakes instantly, skidded slightly on the wet pavement, and stopped almost completely. The only contact was a faint brush between the car's bumper and the hem of her pants, causing no damage, no injury, and no physical discomfort at all. Yet the woman immediately pulled out her phone to record videos, called the police, and filed an official complaint for dangerous driving. When officers arrived, they completely ignored her illegal jaywalking and distracted behavior, ruling solely based on the fact that a vehicle had touched a pedestrian. The innocent driver was fined $300, lost license points, and received a traffic violation on his record, while the law-breaking pedestrian walked away scot-free. This unfair double standard is not a rare mistake, it is the daily default rule for every American driver, who must drive in constant fear of other people's carelessness no matter how strictly they follow the law. Parking enforcement adds another layer of selective injustice that targets new residents and outsiders while protecting local insiders. Every residential street and fire lane is covered in bright yellow no parking lines and warning signs threatening heavy fines and towing. Long-term local drivers know the hidden loophole perfectly. You can illegally park in restricted zones as long as you stay inside the car, and police will always turn a blind eye. But if a newcomer, tourist, or young renter pauses for 10 seconds to drop off a passenger or grab a quick item, they will receive an immediate, unforgiving ticket with zero leniency. This two-tier enforcement system creates a bizarre, unfair reality where rule-breaking is allowed for locals, while strict punishment waits for anyone who follows the written rules honestly. American workplace culture carries an equally absurd reversed value system that completely contradicts traditional work ethics. Every company publicly promotes hard work, teamwork, equality, and work-life balance in meetings and training videos, claiming to reward dedication and positivity. In reality, laziness and slackness are fully tolerated and even protected, while diligence and initiative are actively discouraged. Employees regularly show up to work in pajamas and slippers, bring pets to the office, scroll social media for hours, take endless unapproved breaks, and leave early without punishment, all labeled as personal freedom and workplace individuality. However, employees who arrive on time, finish tasks ahead of schedule, organize workflows, or stay slightly late to complete work are frequently pulled into private HR meetings and warned that they create workplace involution, pressure colleagues, and disrupt team harmony. My coworker Matthew, a typical ordinary American office worker, perfectly embodies this strange workplace survival logic. He has a stable salary, no financial pressure, and steady job security, yet he practices extreme zero-cost resource hoarding every single workday. His first daily routine is not working but scavenging all free public office supplies, pens, sticky notes, folders, printer paper, coffee bags, tea packets, napkins, and disposable tableware. He fills his desk drawers with these scavenged items every week and takes the excess home to supply his entire household for free. For nearly a decade, his family has never bought basic daily or office consumables, relying entirely on public company resources. All colleagues see this behavior clearly, yet no one criticizes him, because in American workplace logic, free riding on public resources is smart personal resourcefulness, while hard work is disruptive and problematic. This warped value system slowly crushes motivation, forcing every diligent newcomer to slack off and blend into mediocrity to avoid disciplinary warnings. The most universally hated and inescapable bizarre system in American daily life is mandatory tipping culture, a predatory unspoken rule that turns optional gratitude into a forced hidden tax. Globally, tipping is a voluntary reward for excellent service, a kind gesture for extra effort and kindness. In America, tipping is compulsory for almost every service scenario, even when zero service is provided. Restaurant owners intentionally pay their staff far below the minimum wage, shifting the entire salary burden onto ordinary customers. The most ridiculous cases happen in fully self-service environments. The self-service cafeteria near my office requires customers to order, pick up food, clean tables, and dispose of trash completely by themselves, with zero staff interaction. Even so, the checkout screen forces fixed tip options of 15, 18, and 20% with no zero tip option available. You cannot finish your transaction without tipping. Once I chose the lowest 15% tip during a busy lunch break, and a staff member who never served me at all chased me outside the store to remind me that 18% was the mandatory baseline, claiming lower tipping was disrespectful to staff. This blatant shakedown happens millions of times every day across America. Tipping also applies to grocery bagging, package delivery, furniture assembly, home repairs, and hotel cleaning, creating endless invisible monthly expenses for ordinary families with no way to opt out or negotiate. Neighborhood life is filled with equally bizarre ordinary locals who live extremely counterintuitive lifestyles by choice, not by poverty. My next-door neighbor Harold is a healthy, fully employed supermarket worker with stable savings, no debt, and zero financial hardship, yet he has lived an extreme zero-consumption lifestyle for 10 straight years. He never buys groceries, meat, dairy, or vegetables for his family, relying entirely on discarded food from local supermarkets and restaurants, thanks to America's extremely rigid and wasteful commercial food laws. American regulations force stores to throw away all unsold food approaching the best before date, even if the food is perfectly fresh, sealed, and edible. Stores are banned from discounting, donating, or gifting these foods, forced to destroy thousands of dollars of fresh steak, seafood, bread, fruit, and dairy products every single day. Harold memorizes every store's closing and disposal time, collecting these perfectly good discarded foods every evening. He cleans, sanitizes, and cooks them for his family, and even hosts neighborhood dinners with these recycled ingredients, never feeling embarrassed or ashamed. He believes he is avoiding corporate waste rather than being poor, and surprisingly,